Good old instant karma. By its very nature, it's just freaking satisfying, watching bullies or jerks get immediately put in their place. I witnessed one such event in my very own classroom, and it filled me with satisfaction, but also pride and joy. Now, this isn't because a student of mine was harmed or embarrassed in any way. Quite the opposite. One student I teach is extremely friendly and never fails to ask me how I'm feeling and have a short conversation with me. He's not the best at English. His reading, writing, and speaking struggle and lag behind his classmates. But what he is good at is just general communication. Because of our everyday conversations about the weather, breakfast, feelings, and the weekend, he has become an expert in English small talk. One time in class, we were practicing these daily questions as review, and this student was selected somewhat maliciously by his classmates to go up into the front and answer. His classmates snickered contentedly to themselves, smug as hell, as they were sure he would fail and make a fool of himself. To everyone's disbelief, he strode confidently to the front of the class and rattled off my small talk questions without even thinking, with near perfect pronunciation, and didn't hesitate for a second. I've never seen a classroom grow so quiet, and with his head held high, he went and sat back down. Dang, his class never fully recovered from that karma bomb, and never threw him under the English bus again, and I couldn't be prouder of him. We still have small talk conversations to this day, and he's one of my favorite students. Koban Jet swung into the Kochi Adventure course. It's a rope, zipline, climbing, and obstacle course built up into the Yasuhara forest. On the drive up, I was terrified the freezing sprinkling of rain would turn into heavy rain, and this event would be cancelled like the barbecue. But to my luck, the weather worked out. I saw a fellow jet parked on the side of the road driving up. Apparently, he had spotted some wild monkeys and had pulled over to take a video. Despite the monkeys and the weather, everyone arrived safely, and we got to climbing. The course took about 2.5 hours, and the funniest and most terrifying obstacle was the Tarzan swing, where adventurers drop and swing from a tree, face first into a net. Most people screamed when they swung, and I thought I would be a tough guy and stay silent. But when you swing, there's a brief few seconds of weightlessness, unlike riding a zip line where you feel supported the entire time. So despite my attempts to be tough, I did scream as I fell, a fact I'm sure nobody will ever know. Afterwards, we headed to the Suno Town roadside station, where we had a pleasant chat and enjoyed piping hot bowls of the local specialty, shishi ramen, a ramen bowl featuring local boar meat. It really hit the spot after a cold day of Tarzan practice. Across the street from the station was a massive roller slide whose entrance was a giant tengu face, so of course everyone had to give it a slide before we parted ways. I drove home with a smile on my face and a warmth in my chest. I look forward to hanging out with Suno Yasuhara Jets again. A new arch-nemesis has been added to the Bold Basan roster. First was the unscrupulous licking man, then the aggressive early riser dog man. Now in the third arc we have boisterous belly boy. At the October Katsuo Festival in Kuroshio, once again the young Japanese boy who demands friendship and follows foreign men around festivals was in attendance. I managed to successfully ignore him for most of the festival, as another foreign man at the festival was the current target. Said man even attempted several times to walk past me, to relinquish the boy onto me, but his attempt to throw me under the Belly Boy bus failed. However, eventually Belly Boy grew bored of his current target, and he spotted me and ran over, a grin of pure unrelinquished malice on his face. I'm sure my own expression was far less enthused. When I refused to acknowledge Belly Boy, to my supreme horror, he positioned himself in front of me and lifted his shirt up over his head, yelling at me in Japanese, "Look at my stomach!" Now, you know how he earned the name Belly Boy. I was mortified, and I shot my eyes to the roof of the market. I responded in Japanese, "Oh, I can't see, too bad." But my nemesis was undeterred. Look at my stomach," he insisted. The Japanese grandmothers around me gently scolded the boy, saying, Put your shirt down. Aren't you cold?" Eventually, Belly Boy complied, and as the grandmothers distracted him, I made my escape. I have yet to encounter Belly Boy at any festivals, and I pray my luck holds out. It seems a dedicated Bold Basson segment to my faithful, well-oiled, and perfectly functioning driving machine continues. When my parents visited Japan, we stopped by the mechanic to have my tire checked, as one was going a little flat. The mechanic put a special foam over the tire to look for an air leak, but he didn't find one. He filled it with air and said to keep an eye on it. For 2 or so weeks, the tire was fine until one Tuesday morning before work. When I drove out of my parking lot, I immediately noticed my car was shaking and bumping unnaturally, and the steering felt odd. Sure enough, the tire was now completely flat, and I would have to scramble and find a ride for work. As terrible as that is, I'm very lucky, as the aforementioned weekend before this breakdown, I was driving in the Usahara Mountains with no cell service, and if my tire had gone flat up there, it would have been an even bigger pain in the ass than it already was. At this point, I think I'm ready to ride trains or walk to all future destinations. During the last Ogata Junior High Sports Day, one of my students was running as hard as he could for the baton relay. About halfway around the track, his gait instantly slowed and he began to limp. Slowly, he managed to hobble to the finish line and pass his baton off to his teammate, and then he fell back onto the track. The school nurse went over to check on him, but they weren't sure if he tore a muscle, sprained his ankle, or had broken a bone. Since the other teachers were busy running the sports day, the rescue fell to me. The office staff at Ogata asked me to carry the student to the nurse's office, so I knelt, squatted, and carried the boy on my back. Good thing I had been training squats, as I pressed up about 130 pounds and carried the student past parents to the nurse's office. I was terrified I would drop him. People are really heavy and awkward to carry, even for a short distance. I'm sure I wouldn't have been able to do it if I hadn't been training in the gym. I felt bad for the student, and I was told he had broken his leg. However, the next week he was back in class without so much as a cast, so I think he had just gotten a really bad muscle cramp. Even so, it felt good to be able to use my strength for something useful and meaningful. One sunny Sunday morning, 3 of us Kuroshio ALTs joined a handful of my junior high school students, and we played a few rounds of good old beach tennis. It was awesome to hang out with students outside of the school context, as we could drop the stress of learning, tests, and formality and just hang out and enjoy each other's company. The weather was perfect and surprisingly warm for winter. We went barefoot and didn't even freeze. On the contrary, I was worried about getting sunburnt. After crushing a few hours worth of beach tennis, we had a relaxing lunch at an Oshade Kuroshio guest house. The students brought homemade pizza and onigiri their mothers had prepared, including a spaghetti pizza that I kept ribbing them about, much to their disdain. With lunch tucked away, we played a few board games to end the day. A stellar, meaningful, and memorable event. Another great day. Kochi A-Jet ventured down the Nyoto River into ancient Ino Town to make homemade washi paper postcards. With a crowd of 20 paper people, we drove straight into the heart of the museum and directly into crafting. I've run through this workshop with jets and my parents before, so I was familiar with the procedure. After the event, a small group of jets and I headed to a local cafe called Goose on the Roof. It was a quaint and fascinating place, decorated like a grandmother's house with knitted doilies, odd retro souvenir decorations, and a general old homey feel. True to its fabled name, there was indeed a goose on the roof. The food was Japanese brunch style, which is bread and salad heavy, served alongside coffee. I enjoyed the brunch, but I'm more partial to protein, so while it was incredibly delicious, I found it a little unsatisfying. However, what was satisfying was the decadent desserts, and I helped myself to the best cream puff I've gotten after in Japan and probably my life. I enjoyed pleasant conversation, the food, and taking pictures under a gigantic maple tree. With paper, brunch, and dessert under my belt, it was safe to call it a successful day. A mid-year teaching conference is held for Kochi Jet participants every December. Historically, one day is hosted by the Kochi Prefectural Education Center and another day by the Prefectural Advisor Team, which is made up of Kochi Jet volunteers. This year was the hardest conference I've been to, but also the most personally rewarding. As a leader, you step up and put yourself in a position to lead and be questioned and criticized. People are watching you and your actions, and they're judging you. This isn't a bad thing. It's the job of a leader to answer questions to the best of their ability, or to withstand the criticism of their actions and take responsibility for both the good and the bad. By stepping up, you are literally and metaphorically putting yourself in this position. But I'm not used to the feeling. Nobody knew who I was the past few times I've been to the conference. I could be the gray man and blend in with the crowd. Now, nearly everybody knew me, and trust me, my big bald head sticks out like a beacon. At the conference, I met multiple Jets who watched my YouTube channel before coming to Japan or while in Japan, and they recognized me and came up to me and told me. It's a feeling I'm not used to, but it made me feel joyful, and the purpose that I intended for the Bold Basan is being fulfilled. I realized I was experiencing success from the Bold Basan while still working in Japan, and that was honestly an indescribably good feeling. These Jets told me that I inspired them, they admired me, or that I'd influenced them in some way. I kind of felt bashful about it all. I wasn't sure what to say to them. Besides, thank you. I guess it's a small taste of what being a large YouTuber would actually feel like. I love inspiring people and sharing my enthusiasm, but I feel as awkward about compliments as I do criticism. It's a real skill to accept both criticism and praise with grace, to still hold your own balanced judgment of yourself and what you do. You're not as awful as haters make you out to be, but you're not a saint who can do no wrong either. The Kuroshio ALT team crafted original posters, custom Karta cards, and sang Christmas carols at a local cultural festival in town. I hadn't prepared any music in particular, but I brought my guitar along just in case, and it turns out that was a good call. On the spot, I learned how to play Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and a couple other Christmas carols, and we sang and danced with Japanese children and their parents. We played a few high-stakes round of cornhole, a game where you try to toss a corn beanbag into a slanted platform with a hole. After we finished, I took a quick look around the festival and spotted handwritten and hand-drawn journals from our previous supervisor. He would often arrive early to work and write in his journal, talking about his thoughts, his adventures, and his life in Kuroshio. It's a powerful keepsake, and it was cool to see it displayed. Unfortunately, his journal was handwritten in English, meaning the average Japanese person would be hopeless to read it. But Bonji also drew photos as well to some extent, so Japanese people might catch the meaning. It was nice to see his life in Kuroshio presented for people to see. Something hilarious that a few enthusiastic students at my school have mastered is the ability to Photoshop themselves into PowerPoint presentations, as if they were stock photo models. Of course, the quality of the Photoshop jobs are straight up brutal, but having themselves or their friends in the presentation pointing to examples or using gestures is hilarious. I wasn't creative enough to do this in school, but maybe I'll surprise my students and use this technique against them in the future. I'm sure after I do it, it won't be cool anymore, and the students will probably stop, which would be a shame. At an elementary school I used to teach at, I once did a Mario impression to the students there and sealed my fate forever. It was my first day at the school, and thinking I was the funniest and coolest teacher in all of Japan, I said to them, "It's a me, Mario," and made the associated classical Mario sounds like wah, yahoo, and yippee. Since that fated day, word of my Mario impression spread amongst the younger students. The downside was they never learned my real name, and if they did learn it, they never used it. Out on the playground, they would run up to me with smiling, beaming faces, yelling, "It's a me, Mario!" and I would happily reply, "It's a me, Mario." And they would see me in the hallway and yell, "It's a me, Mario." And I would teach their class sometimes, and they would greet me with, "You guessed it, it's a me, Mario." I don't go to that school any longer, but even now, while I'm out in public, if an elementary school student sees me, they'll yell out, "It's a me, Mario." If I'm ever worried that I never made a meaningful multicultural impact in Japan, in teaching or in my life, that no one will remember my name and my legacy will be lost in the sands of time, I will think back to those children fondly and say to myself, "It's a me, Mario." That's all for now. Take care and be bold.